Bornholdt.
All right. Before we get into the interview questions, I just have a few preliminary questions for you. Can you tell me what dates you worked for RCA and what was your job title?
Okay, I joined RCA in March 1951 in Camden. I left Camden to go into the service in the Air Force in 1954. I came out of the service in '56 and went to work for RCA in Moorestown, New Jersey. And I retired from Moorestown in March of 1996. I was an engineer in Camden. I rejoined in Moorestown as an engineer and then became a program engineer, a program manager, and a manager of marketing.
All right, you said you retired work at RCA in 1996?
Yes.
All right. And your job title was?
At that time, I believe I was back in program manager, so I'd be a manager in managing program management.
How did you get your job at RCA?
That's an interesting story. I graduated Penn State in 1949 with a Bachelor of Science in EE. And there was very little job market at that time. It was familiarly known as the Truman Depression. I took 50 interviews and got no jobs, except I had one offer to go to work for Aramco, Arabian American Oil Company. And for two reasons, I had no interest. I didn't want to go to Saudi Arabia, and it was going to be in power, and I was not interested in power. I was interested in electronics. And so I took a job, essentially, with the school, worked in research in the ionospheric research lab, and at the same time I went for a master's degree. And I was a radio amateur, and had contacts with people all over. One of them was a Mr. E. Miles Brown, who lived down here in Jersey and worked for RCA. And in 1951, RCA was beginning to hire in the service company, and so he suggested to them that they contact me, which they did, and I took an interview with them. And didn't think anything of it because I didn't hear anything for a while. And one weekend I was away, and I got a telegram offering me a job at $70 a week. And I think it was like Friday when the telegram got there, and I had already left. And another telegram came 24 hours later. It offered me $75 a week, and if I answered right away, and that was a final offer. And so when I got there on Monday, I took the $75 a week offer. And it was not to work with a service company, but to work in Camden. And that's how I came to join RCA. It's interesting, I was thinking about this on the way here this morning. I used to drive from Penn State down to the shore where my girlfriend was working as a waitress in the summers. And as I would drive over the Ben Franklin Bridge, I would look off to my right, and there was a smelly, smoky mess down there of companies and businesses and rail yards. And I thought, boy, who would ever want to work there? And here I was in 1951 working there.
Oh, well, can you describe what you did at RCA?
What did I do at RCA? When I first started out, I was a young engineer working in a group that worked on various projects, including an infrared burglar detector, a radio receiver for the first one ever built for submerged submarines. I worked on test equipment that was used when RCA went into the color TV business. And then I went to service, and when I came back, I went to work for Moorestown. And the first job there, I was an engineer in a group that was designing a computer for the tailless land-based system. That computer, by the way, was being built before there was solid-state devices, and it used relays in it. And radar business, and I handled all kinds of jobs there.
What kind of wages and benefits did you earn at RCA?
Well, as I said, my first job paid $75 a week. When I came back from the service, as I remember, I had to be rehired because I'd been gone for 2 years, even though I'd been in the service. And I think the offer was for $6,000 a year. And after I took the job, I talked to personnel and showed them a letter. I had a letter of accommodation from the Air Force from my service, and I got a raise to $8,000 a year.
Oh, it was a lot back then?
You bet it was a lot back then.
What were your relationships with your coworkers like?
Oh, I had a lot of good friends in engineering.
Were there a variety of ethnic groups when you worked at RCA?
Depending on how you define that, I would say yes. There was, my boss was of Japanese descent. I think he was a Nisei, Herb Nishino. And I have trouble remembering all the people that I worked with back then. I certainly can't call the faces back, and I can only get a few of the names.
Mm-hmm. Well, what were your working conditions like?
What were the working conditions? In those, good. In those days, the engineers worked in what we call a bullpen. You had a desk, and the laboratory would be separate from where your desk was. But your desk and every other engineer's desk were in rows and rows and rows and rows in a great big area, a great big room.
Mm-hmm. What was one of your most memorable experiences working at RCA?
Oh boy. You've got to remember that in my later years, I had people working for me who were running programs, and I had all kinds of interesting experiences, and then I traveled a great deal. I like to tell people that at one point I made 3 trips to Florida in 1 week, and it was before the age of jets. So I was down and back and down and back and down and back 3 times in 1 week. So I traveled a great deal, saw great, all over. Went to Europe, went to South America, went to Canada. Never got to the Far East.
Can you describe an average workday?
Well, that depended. On the early days, I worked an 8 to 5. When I was a program manager, the day got to be a little bit longer. And when I got to be a manager of programs, it got to be longer than that. I would tend to go in at 7:30, because we had business in Europe, and they were 5 hours ahead of us. So I'd like to call them early in the morning, and then I'd be in the office after 5, because we have business in California and West Coast and in the Pacific and Hawaii, places like that. And to talk to them while they were working meant you had to stay up to 5 o'clock. So it was a long day, but it was fun.
What kinds of changes were made over the years you were at RCA?
What kind of changes?
Yeah, were made over the years.
Well, the major changes came when we were bought by other companies. We were bought by GE, who had no idea of our kind of business. We were saved when GE sold us to Martin Marietta, who were in the same, who had the same kinds of approach to government business that RCA had. And then there was another change when Lockheed bought us just before I retired.
How much did RCA influence the growth of Camden?
How much did they influence?
The growth of Camden?
I guess that's hard to say, because there were a lot of other businesses. When I went to work for RCA, in that same general area, there was a furniture company down the street in Cooper. I can't remember their name, but they were a big furniture company. Camel Soup was located right near us. There was a soap factory on the other side. There was a large amount of industry in Camden in those days. The shipyard was running down towards Gloucester. There were businesses on the north side of the Ben Franklin Bridge. So RCA was a good-sized company, but there were a lot of other businesses in Camden.
How much, how long did you work at RCA?
How long did I work there?
Mm-hmm.
I worked in Camden from 51 to 54. And that's when I went to service.
Why did you leave RCA?
Well, I left the first time because the Uncle Sam said, "You're in the service," but I got married. I came home from my honeymoon, and there was a brown envelope waiting for me, and inside it were 50 mimeograph sheets, which started out with DP, which meant Direction of the President, and that meant that I was in the service. And the second time was because I was 3 years past retirement. My wife had gotten over cancer, and I figured it was a good time to retire.
Can you describe how you felt when RCA closed?
Oh, sad. It was a good company to work for. We were just talking about that before this.
You ever thought about going back?
Oh,
Well,
I couldn't because the
before it
company was
closed.
bought by GE, and GE wrecked it.
What did you enjoy about working at RCA?
First of all, I enjoyed the kind of work that I was doing. I enjoyed working with people. And the product that we had, we were preeminent in, which made it very easy to make sales of it. And RCA was fair with you. I never had any complaints that thought I was being mistreated. As a matter of fact, towards the end of my career, I was pretty well like running like my own business inside of a bigger business.
Oh wow. You felt distant from everyone? Did you feel distant from everybody?
I don't know quite how to answer that.
All right. Well, that's all the questions.
That's all the questions.
Yeah. Thank you for staying in the time limit.
Okay.
I appreciate it.